They called it salvation. We called it a leash. Commander Eva Martel stood on the command deck of the Terran Mandate Saint Ship Indra, a vessel forged for contact, not conquest. Below the world of Xylos shimmered a jewel of nascent blue and hopeful green. But wrapped around it like a parasite of pure energy was the glyptal hegemony's gratitude tithe. 3 immense crystalline ships hung in geostationary orbit, their spires drinking the planet's output through sickly emerald tethers. It was a vampire's embrace, cloaked in the language of jurisprudence. He could feel the cold fury simmering just beneath his uniform's calm exterior, a feeling he knew he must master. The coming conflict would not be won with torpedoes, but with testimony before a star court that valued precedent above all. Fleet Mind confirmed the energy draw. Martel said, his voice a low hum that cut through the bridge's quiet efficiency. A voice serene and timeless, echoed not from a speaker, but from the very air around him. Confirmed, Commander. The Glyptal fleet is siphoning 18.4% of the Xylon planetary grid. Their stated justification is Clause 4 of the Emergency Sustenance Pact, citing protective services rendered. This was Aurora, the soul of the Indra, a mind of quantum light and cold logic. Her presence was a constant soothing pressure against his temples. The pact they invoke is ancient but legally sound under galactic precedent. Legal Officer Jorek stepped forward, his data slate glowing with highlighted text. Sound but predatory. They saved Xylos from a rogue asteroid swarm 2 years ago. Now they are billing them for the privilege of existence with interest compounded hourly. His finger traced a line of dense legalese. They have the Xylons in a gratitude collar, and they are tightening it. Debt was a weapon that never cooled. Martel watched the emerald beams pulse a steady, ravenous heartbeat. He knew this was more than a simple shakedown. It was a test, a demonstration of a legal doctrine so perverse it threatened the very idea of mutual aid. The Glyptal did not conquer with armies. They conquered with contracts turning survivors into servants. The Terran Mandate had sent the Indra not to break the blockade but to break the precedent. Failure here would legitimize this predatory system for 1,000 other worlds. The Xylons have transmitted a formal appeal to the Mandate. Jorek added, his tone grim. The Glyptal intercepted it and filed a counter-injunction citing interference in a valid debt servitude agreement. They are inviting us to challenge them, Commander. They want to make an example of us in the corridor of law. In a cramped Xylon habitation unit, a young girl named Alara watched the lights flicker again. Her father switched their small nutrient paste synthesizer to the lowest power setting, his face etched with worry in the dim glow. The story player, her favorite toy, had gone dark weeks ago. "Will the Sky Strangers help Papa?" she whispered, looking at the ceiling, as if she could see through it, to the new silver ship that had arrived. Her father pulled her close, the fabric of his worn tunic, thin against her cheek. He had no answer, only the quiet, grinding fear of a debt that had no end. Martel's gaze shifted from the planet to the lead Glyptal vessel. "Open a channel full diplomatic protocols. Let's speak to the ones holding the leash." He straightened his uniform, the dark blue material settling on his shoulders like a mantle of responsibility. He would be calm. He would be precise. He would not give them the satisfaction of his anger. Anger was a currency they understood and welcomed, a tool to provoke a mistake. Justice, however, was a language they had forgotten how to speak. The transmission opened, and a face of polished gray certitude appeared on the main screen. He was the first Tithe Master Vorn, his features sharp and avian, his eyes holding the flat, patient confidence of a predator that knows its prey is trapped. Commander Martel of the Terran vessel Indra Vorn chirped, his voice smooth as oiled stone. "To what do we owe the pleasure of your observation? Have you come to admire the workings of reciprocal grace?" Every word, was a carefully chosen barb. Tithe Master Vorn, we have received a petition from the sovereign people of Xylos. They claim your reciprocal grace is starving their world. Martel kept his tone level, a placid lake over a churning abyss. He saw the flicker of amusement in Vorn's eyes. This was a game to him, a well-rehearsed performance of power. Sovereign Vorn's smile was a thin, bloodless line. Their sovereignty is guaranteed by our protection. A small tithe on their energy production is all we ask in return for their continued safety. It is a simple, elegant equation of gratitude. Surely the Terran mandate understands the sanctity of an agreement. The universe remembered debts longer than it remembered borders. We understand the principle of equitable cost, Martel countered, stepping closer to the screen. We have also reviewed the data from the asteroid event. The threat was minimal. Your response was disproportionate, as is your compensation. Vorn's condescension was a palpable force. Your review is irrelevant. The Xylan leadership signed the pact. They were grateful then, Commander. We are merely here to ensure their gratitude does not fade with memory. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Do not interfere. The old pacts are strong. Challenge us, and you will find your own mandate entangled in laws you have long neglected. The transmission cut, leaving Vorn's smug visage imprinted in Martel's mind. He turned to his officers. He's right about one thing. The old pacts are strong, but their strength comes from their integrity. He thinks we will fight him on moral grounds. We will not. We will fight him on his accounting. Aurora's voice filled the space. His strategy is sound, Commander. He will drag us into a public inquiry, frame us as emotional idealists, and use the letter of the law to paint the Xylans as ungrateful children. The quorum of watchers will see a valid contract being upheld. He will win by making us look weak. Then we will not look weak, Martel stated. Yorick, prepare the filing. We accept the Tithe Master's invitation to the corridor of law. We will convene a public inquiry. Kalen. His pragmatic operations officer shifted his weight. Sir, that's exactly what he wants. It's his chosen battlefield. He gestured to the tactical display. A few well-placed energy bursts could disable those tethers without harming their ships. A surgical strike. Martel shook his head. And prove him right. Prove that we are just another power block, enforcing our will with violence, no. We win this by their rules, so that the victory cannot be questioned. He looked at the shimmering image of Xylos. This is not about one world. It is about the idea that a helping hand should not come with a chain attached. A ship built to teach must not behave like a cudgel. He turned to his legal officer. Yorick, I want every transaction, every energy transfer, every piece of communication between the Glyptal and the Xylans since the day they arrived. I want a complete audit of their salvation. Aurora, I want you to calculate the true cost of their intervention. Down to the last jewel, down to the last man-hour. We are going to present the Glyptal with a bill of our own. The fleet mind's light on the central console pulsed a soft, affirmative blue. The calculus is already underway, Commander. The patterns are illuminating. The Glyptal are masters of inflated invoicing. For the next cycle, the Indra was a hive of silent, focused activity. Data flowed from Xylan archives, from mandate listening posts from Aurora's own deep space sensors that had been passively observing the system long before their arrival. Yorick and his small legal team worked without rest, constructing a case built not on emotion or ethics, but on the cold, hard reality of numbers. They were building a mirror, one polished with facts, ready to show the Glyptal their own distorted reflection. Martel spent most of this time in the ship's arboretum, a sphere of green and living things that smelled of wet earth and clean oxygen. It was the only place the recycled air of the ship felt truly fresh. He stood before a towering oak, its ancestors rooted in the soil of Earth, and centered himself. Vorn's arrogance was a vulnerability. He was overconfident, steeped in a tradition of legal bullying that had never been properly challenged. The Glyptal had forgotten that laws were meant to be shields for the weak, not clubs for the strong. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. The day of the inquiry arrived. The process was not held in a physical room, but in a pocket of formalized space-time known as the Corridor of Law. A neutral third-party AI served as arbiter, its presence a simple, unwavering beacon of pure white light. The Indra's command deck transformed its main screen, becoming a window into this sterile digital courtroom. Martel, Yorick, and Kalen stood at attention, their formal dress uniforms, a stark contrast to the shimmering, almost ethereal robes of Tithemaster Vorn. Floating around them in the virtual space were thousands of glowing motes, the silent, observing quorum. Each mote represented a major institution, a world, a faction from across the known quadrant of the galaxy. Their judgment was not binding, but their consensus was everything. Public opinion was the final arbiter in the court of interstellar relations. The arbiter's voice was a set of harmonized, genderless tones. This inquiry is convened at the request of the Terran mandate vessel Indra to challenge the legitimacy of the gratitude tithe, enacted upon the Xylan Protectorate by the Glyptal hegemony. Tithe Master Vorn, you may begin. Vorn glided forward, his movements practiced and theatrical. Honored arbiter, esteemed quorum. The issue before us is simple. The Glyptal hegemony, acting in accordance with the ancient and respected emergency sustenance pacts, responded to a cry for help. We averted a catastrophe. We saved every life on Xylos. In return, we asked for a modest tithe, a gesture of gratitude, to fuel our continued vigilance. The people of Xylos agreed. A pact was sealed. He gestured towards Martel. Now these newcomers arrive filled with a misguided and reckless sentimentality. They wish to undo a sacred agreement. They call our tithe a leash, but I ask you, what is the alternative? Should an act of profound generosity go unrewarded? Should the shepherd not be sustained by the flock he protects? To nullify this pact is to nullify the very concept of gratitude in the galaxy. His words were potent, resonating with the ancient principles of contract and reciprocity that held the galactic order together. Martel could feel the silent shift in the quorum. Vorn was framing this perfectly. He was the protector, the savior. The humans were the interlopers, the emotional wrecking balls. Yorick stepped forward, his demeanor calm and academic. Tithemaster Vorn, no one is questioning the concept of gratitude. We are questioning the mathematics of your invoice. A ledger of pure data is the ultimate truth-teller. Vorn scoffed a delicate, dismissive sound. Mathematics, this is a matter of law and principle, not an accounting exercise. Is it? Yorick's voice remained even. Let us examine the principle. The Emergency Sustenance Pact is designed to allow a savior fleet to recoup its operational costs with a modest honorarium for the risks involved. It is not a license for perpetual servitude. He looked directly at Vorn. Could you please state for the public record the exact calculated cost of the Xylos rescue operation? This was the first stone cast. A simple request for a number. Vorn hesitated for a fraction of a second, the first crack in his polished facade. The costs were considerable. The energy expenditure, the risk to our fleet, the complex orbital mechanics. It is not a simple sum. We believe it is. Yorick pressed. We have had our fleet mind Aurora conduct a thorough analysis based on all available data. We have the number. He paused, letting the silence hang in the virtual space. Unless you would like to provide your own first... Vorn's eyes narrowed. He was being boxed in. To refuse would be an admission of obfuscation. To provide a number meant it could be audited, challenged. Our ledgers are complex. It is not a matter for public debate. All debts are a matter for public debate when they are collected in the public square. Martel interjected, his voice cutting through the chamber for the first time. He stepped beside Yorick. Tithemaster, you speak of principles. Let us adhere to the principle of transparency. Your entire legal standing rests on a pact freely entered into. Surely the terms of that pact, including the specific cost of services rendered, are not a secret. The logic was inescapable. Vorn knew it. He was a master of using law as a shield, but now it was being used as a scalpel against him. He was being forced to speak his method aloud, to quantify his grace. The cost, Vorn said slowly, his voice losing its silken edge, was approximately 100,000 terajoules of energy expenditure, plus ancillary risk assessments. It was a monstrously inflated number, a figure plucked from arrogance rather than reality. Martel nodded slowly. Thank you, Tithemaster. He turned slightly, looking into the empty air, where he knew Aurora's presence was focused. Aurora, please display your findings. Project the mirror ledger. The air in the corridor of law shimmered. Beside the Glyptal's stated claim, a new set of figures began to construct themselves line by line in stark, glowing blue. It was Aurora's audit, a perfect, unforgiving reflection of the truth. The energy cost of deflecting the asteroid swarm was not 100,000 terajoules. It was 6,000. The risk to the Glyptal fleet was statistically negligible. Their ships were never in any danger. Aurora's projection included trajectory models, energy dispersal patterns, and a complete logistical breakdown. A true reckoning is not a judgment. It is a measurement. The mirror ledger continued to build. It showed the true operational cost, then added the maximum allowable honorarium under the pact, a generous 20%. The total bill for saving Xylos, according to a flawless, unbiased quantum mind, was a single finite number. Below it, Aurora began to display the energy the Glyptal had already siphoned from the planet. They had collected their true costs, plus the honorarium 150 times over. The motes of the quorum began to drift and pulse, their silent consensus shifting like a tide. They were not witnessing a debate about philosophy anymore. They were witnessing a public audit of a grand theft. Vorn stared at the numbers, his composure finally shattering. This is an outrage, a fabrication. Your machine mind is biased. Aurora does not have bias, Martel said, his voice as cold and clear as the space between stars. She has data. The same data your ships collected. The same data the planet of Xylos recorded. The same data the universe itself wrote in the language of physics. He took a step closer to Vorn's shimmering image. You did not come here to be a shepherd. You came here to be a wolf, and you cloaked yourself in the letter of the law. But numbers do not lie, Tithemaster, and your numbers tell a story of profound and calculated greed. He turned to address the arbiter and the silent quorum. The Glyptal hegemony is not collecting a debt. They are perpetrating a fraud. They have violated the spirit and the letter of the Emergency Sustenance Pact. The pact is therefore void. Not only should the tithe be ended immediately, but reparations should be made. All energy taken above and beyond the true cost must be returned. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Yorick had used the law to force Vorn to state a number. Martel had used mathematics to prove that number a lie. It was a 1-2 punch of logic and reason delivered on a public stage for the whole quadrant to see. The Glyptal's greatest weapon, the sanctity of a contract, had been turned against them. The contract was predicated on an honest exchange, and the exchange had been revealed as a swindle. The cost of a lie is the truth that replaces it. The arbiter's light pulsed a brilliant, blinding white. The evidence presented by the Terran mandate vessel Indra is compelling. The discrepancy in the accounting is significant. Tithe Master Vorn, do you have a rebuttal to this specific data? Can your ledgers refute this mirror ledger? Vorn was speechless. His entire case, his entire philosophy was built on a foundation of obfuscation and the assumption that no one would ever have the audacity or the means to check his math. To produce his own ledgers now would be to admit his guilt. To refuse would be the same. He had been perfectly legally and publicly trapped. He had walked into his own cage and locked the door behind him. In the Xylan habitation unit, the main light flickered, then suddenly blazed to full steady brightness for the first time in 2 years. Ilara gasped, her eyes wide. Her father stumbled back, shielding his face from the unexpected glare. Across the city, across the entire planet, power grids surged back to life. The emerald tethers, the symbols of their indenture, were dissolving into harmless motes of light, their connections severed by a judgment rendered light years away. On the bridge of the Indra, Kylan let out a slow, controlled breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It's over. They're cutting the beams. Martel watched the main screen, his expression unreadable. Vorn's image had vanished, choosing to disconnect rather than face the final verdict. The Arbiter's voice filled the void. The inquiry is concluded. The pact is nullified. The finding is fraud. The white light of the Arbiter faded, and the corridor of law dissolved, leaving them once again on their own command deck. Yorick allowed himself a small, tight smile. We won, Commander. We won the first battle. Martel corrected, his eyes still on the now free planet below. But the war is for the precedent. The Glyptal system has been exposed. Now we have to make sure it is dismantled. He knew the hegemony would not take this loss gracefully. They had been shamed, their business model ruined. A wounded predator was often the most dangerous. Aurora's voice was a calm counterpoint to the tension. Commander, I am detecting a significant energy surge from the remaining Glyptal vessels. It is not consistent with weapons fire or engine activation. It is a broadcast signal directed at the entire Quorum network. On screen, Martel ordered. The image that appeared was not of a ship, but of a document, a seal, ancient and terrible. It was the Glyptal's final desperate move. They were invoking a different kind of law, a darker, more primitive clause buried in the Galactic charters, a clause that had not been used in centuries. It was a formal declaration of grievance, but it was more than that. It was a challenge. Not to a legal inquiry, but to a trial by ordeal, a binding arbitration, where the stakes were not resources, but sovereignty. The Glyptal were escalating, moving the conflict from the courtroom to a place where power, not truth, might be the final arbiter. The law, when cornered, often grows teeth. What is it? Kalen asked, his hand instinctively moving towards the tactical console. It's a censure of humiliation. Jorek said, his face paling as he read the archaic text. They claim we have damaged their honor and their ability to conduct their sacred duty. They are demanding a direct confrontation, overseen by a council of the oldest galactic powers. They are putting the Terran mandate itself on trial. Martel stared at the screen. Vorn had not been defeated. He had simply been forced to change his weapon. He had lost the battle of accounting, so now he was escalating to a war of philosophy. He would argue that humanity's interference, their imposition of numerical truth over sacred tradition, was a threat to the entire galactic order. He would try to isolate them, to paint them as dangerous radicals. He is trying to make us the enemy, Martel said softly. He is turning his shame into a weapon against us. The victory felt hollow now, a mere prelude to a much larger, more dangerous confrontation. The mirror had shown the Glyptal their monstrous face, and they had responded by trying to shatter the mirror itself. The path forward had just become infinitely more treacherous. Aurora's serene voice cut through the rising tension on the bridge. Commander, the censure filing has a mandatory response time. We have 1 cycle to accept or decline. Declining would mean a galactic-level forfeiture of standing, effectively isolating the Terran Mandate from interstellar commerce and law for a generation. There was no choice. They had to accept. Yorick draft the acceptance. Kalen bring the ship to condition yellow. We won, but we just kicked the nest of a very old, very proud serpent. He looked back at Xylos, now shining with its own untaxed light. And we have to make sure the serpent's venom doesn't poison everything we just fought for. The fight for justice rarely ends with the first verdict. As Yorick began to draft the formal response, Martel felt a profound weariness settle over him. He had known this would be difficult, but he had not anticipated the sheer shamelessness of the Glyptol's legal maneuvering. They operated in a system where honor and face were intertwined with law, and they were experts at manipulating all three. He had won with logic, but now he was being challenged to a battle of narrative, of story, where truth was only one of many competing factors. He retreated again to the arboretum, the scent of living soil a small comfort. He stood before the oak tree, its silent strength a rebuke to the chaos of the last few hours. He had wanted a clean victory, a simple triumph of reason over greed. Instead, he had been handed a new and more complex war. He had forced the Glyptal to account for their actions, and their response was to try to make the very act of accounting a crime. Aurora's presence manifested as a gentle chime in his mind. Your biometrics indicate elevated stress, Commander. Your strategy was flawless. The outcome was optimal based on the available variables. The variables have changed, Aurora Martel murmured, resting a hand on the rough bark of the tree. We proved Vorn is a thief. Now he's trying to convince the galaxy that thievery is a sacred tradition, and that we are heretics for calling it by its name. That is an accurate summary of the new strategic reality, the AI replied, her tone unwavering. The censure of humiliation is not a legal proceeding in the same way. It is a test of standing. The Glyptal will argue their way of life, their entire culture is based on the flow of gratitude. They will claim we seek to replace it with a cold, human-centric calculus that devalues honor. The machine mind was right. This was the heart of it. The conflict triangle was no longer just about Xylos. It was about the fundamental nature of galactic society. Human morality based on innate rights and equitable exchange versus the Glyptal method of perpetual obligation. And Aurora herself, the embodiment of pure calculus, was at the center of that conflict. She was their greatest tool, and in this new fight, potentially, their greatest liability. Vorn would paint her as a soulless number cruncher, an affront to the more spiritual, traditional powers. A tool can be a lever or a hammer depending on the hand that wields it. They will fail, Martel said, more to convince himself than the AI. Because at the end of all the speeches behind all the tradition is a simple truth. They are parasites, and we just held up a mirror. Now we will hold it up again in a much larger room. He straightened up, his resolve hardening once more. The weariness was still there, but it was now overlaid with a cold, determined clarity. The Glyptal wanted to put humanity on trial. They wanted to debate the merits of their predatory culture. Very well. He would give them the debate they asked for, and he would bring receipts. He walked back to the command deck, his stride confident. Yorick was finalizing the acceptance of the censure. Kalen had the ship's defenses on standby, a silent but visible promise that they were not intimidated. The crew moved with a quiet, professional purpose, their trust in their commander absolute. Yorick, file it, Martel commanded as he stepped onto the deck. And open a channel to the Xylan Provisional Government. Tell them they are free. But also tell them that the fight to stay free has just begun. He looked at the tactical display where the 3 Glyptal ships still hung in space, no longer tethered to the world below, but no less menacing. They were waiting like spiders in a web for the next stage of their deadly game. The game had changed, and the stakes were no longer just a planet's energy, but the legal soul of the galaxy. The formal acceptance, a packet of cold legal light launched from the Indra, and was absorbed by the lead Glyptol vessel. The response was nearly instantaneous. A set of coordinates and a timestamp appeared on the main screen. The trial by censure would be held before the triumvirate of the unblinking eye, a council of three ancient, non-aligned powers known for their glacial deliberation and unshakable adherence to precedent. The venue was not a virtual corridor, but a designated gravitic anchor point in a system known only for its profound emptiness. "They've chosen the Aegis Deeps," Jorik murmured, his eyes wide. "No one has convened a trial there in 1,000 years. It's a place of final judgment." "They are masters of theater," Martel replied, his voice calm. "They want to frame this as an event of cosmic importance. They are not wrong." He turned to Kalen. "Set a course. Maximum sustainable speed. We have a trial to prepare for." While the Indra sliced through the silent dark, Martel met with his team in the ship's briefing room. A holographic model of the Aegis Deep's anchor floated in the center of the table. "Vorn lost the argument on facts," Martel began, "so he will now make the argument on feeling. He will paint us as cold, unfeeling calculators and himself as a defender of ancient traditions. He will attack Aurora as much as he attacks us." Aurora's voice emanated from the table's surface. "That is the most probable Glyptal strategy. They will attempt to discredit the data by discrediting its source. They will characterize me as an inhuman anomaly whose logic cannot be trusted to weigh matters of spirit and honor. Justice is a machine that must be calibrated for both weight and worth." "And they'll find a sympathetic audience," Jorik added, gesturing to the holographic display. "The triumvirate is composed of the Cathar, a silicon-based life form that values organic memory above all else, a representative of the Cygnian swarm, a hive mind that operates on collective intuition, and a Gavorn loremaster, a being that has not directly communicated in centuries and interprets galactic law through the study of cosmic radiation patterns. They are not going to be impressed by a spreadsheet." "Then we don't give them one," Martel said. "We give them a story. The same story the numbers told, but in a language they will understand." He looked at each of his officers in turn. "Jorik, I want every precedent related to cultural interference, every case where tradition was used to shield an exploit. Kalen, I want a full security analysis of the Glyptal fleet. They have shown a willingness to escalate. We must be prepared for them to do it again. Aurora, I need you to go deeper." "Define deeper, Commander," the AI requested. "Vorn's arrogance is his weakness. He believes his history is his shield. I want you to turn it into our sharpest spear. I want a complete systemic analysis of every Glyptal intervention for the last 500 years. Cross-reference their gratitude tithes with the long-term economic and social health of the worlds they saved. We need to show that this is not an isolated incident. It is a business model, a pattern of predation written across the stars. A pattern once seen can never be unseen. This will require processing vast amounts of public quorum data," Aurora noted. "The scope is unprecedented, but the task is achievable." On Xylos, Ilara and her father stood in a public square, watching the sky. The silver ship of the Terrans was gone, having departed as swiftly as it arrived. The three menacing Glyptal ships were gone too, vanished from their sky for the first time in her memory. The city was alive with light and sound, a festival of reclaimed energy. But Ilara could see the worry that still lingered in her father's eyes. He, like all the adults, had heard the news. Their freedom had started a fire, and now the whole galaxy would watch to see who was consumed by the flames. The journey to the Aegis Deeps was 3 days of intense preparation. Martel spent hours with Aurora sifting through the patterns the AI was uncovering. The data was damning. Worlds saved by the Glyptol experienced a brief period of stability, followed by a slow, inexorable decline in every key metric. Infant mortality, technological advancement, interstellar trade, even artistic output. They were not just draining energy, they were draining hope. They were turning vibrant cultures into stagnant dependencies, all under the guise of reciprocal grace. They were locusts with good lawyers. They arrived at the designated coordinates to find a scene of profound gravity. The Aegis Deeps was a pocket of absolute black, a region of space so devoid of stars, it felt like a wound in the universe. At its center hung the three Glyptal ships and the lone Indra dwarfed by the entities they had come to face. The triumvirate did not use ships. The Cathar was a crystalline mountain floating in the void, its facets glowing with faint internal light. The Cygnian swarm was a shimmering cloud of billions of tiny individual units, moving in a constant hypnotic dance. The Gavorn Loremaster was simply a perfect silent sphere of absolute darkness, absorbing all light and information. This court did not convene, it simply was. The trial began without preamble. Vorn's image appeared before them larger and more imposing than before. He was not in a virtual courtroom but projected against the void itself, his robes the color of fresh blood against the black. His voice boomed across the comms, a sermon directed at the ancient powers. Unblinking eyes of the galaxy, we come before you humbled and aggrieved. We, the Glyptol, have followed the old ways. We have extended our hand to those in peril. We have shielded the weak. We have asked for nothing but the honor of their gratitude, a small measure of sustenance to continue our sacred work. He gestured with a sweeping arm towards the Indra. And for this we are savaged. These humans, these Terrans, have come with their machines and their numbers. They have taken a sacred pact of honor and reduced it to a tradesman's invoice. They hold up their cold calculus as a universal truth, seeking to erase the poetry of tradition with the prose of the abacus. He pointed an accusatory finger. Their machine mind, a thing of wire and light, dares to pass judgment on a culture millennia older than its own. They call us thieves, but it is they who are the true thieves. They seek to steal the very soul of our galaxy, to replace the bonds of honor and gratitude with the sterile chains of their materialist logic. We did not bring a grievance against a single ship. We bring a grievance against a philosophy of death, a way of thinking that will bleed all meaning from the universe, leaving only a ledger of meaningless facts. We ask you to censure them, to silence their corrosive ideology before it spreads. It was a masterful performance. Vorn had reframed the entire conflict. He was no longer a defendant in a case of fraud. He was the prosecutor in a trial of civilizations. Martel could feel the weight of the triumvirate's silent attention. Yorick's legal precedents felt small and fragile against such a grand, sweeping accusation. Now it was his turn. Martel did not project his image into the void. He broadcast from the Indra's bridge, standing with his crew. He wanted the triumvirate to see not just a man, but a team, a community. Judges of the triumvirate. Tithe Master Vorn speaks of poetry. Let us speak of truth. For what is poetry if not truth expressed with beauty? And what is tradition if not a truth that has endured the test of time? He kept his voice measured, respectful. The Terran mandate honors tradition. We honor the sanctity of a pact. But the traditions we honor are those that uplift, that strengthen, that forge bonds of mutual respect. A tradition that requires one party to be perpetually on its knees is not a tradition. It is a cage. A truth spoken plainly is a weapon that cannot be parried. Vorn accuses us of reducing the sacred to the mundane. I say we have done the opposite. We have taken a mundane act of grand larceny and stripped it of its sacred pretensions. He speaks of honor. Is there honor in demanding a mountain of gold for a loaf of bread? Is there honor in presenting a bill so large it can never be paid, ensuring a lifetime of servitude for a moment of aid? He paused, letting his words sink into the silence. He attacks our fleet mind, Aurora. He calls her a soulless calculator. He is correct. She is. And that is why her testimony is so vital. She has no pride. She has no greed. She cannot be swayed by poetry or shamed by accusations. She can only reflect the truth of the numbers. And the numbers in this case tell a story of profound and relentless dishonor on the part of the glyptal hegemony. The Cathar mountain pulsed with a slow, deep light. The Cygnian swarm coalesced into a tighter sphere, the first hint of a reaction. Vorn, sensing a shift, played his next card. Words. Empty human words, he boomed. You speak of our supposed dishonor. But what of the worlds we have nurtured? What of those who are grateful for our protection? Do not listen to this human's sour philosophy. Listen to the voices of those we have saved. From behind the glyptal ships, a procession of smaller vessels emerged. They were from a dozen different worlds, each one flying the flag of a glyptal protectorate. One by one, their leaders appeared as projections testifying to the wisdom and grace of the glyptal. They spoke of the security they enjoyed, of the stability the hegemony provided. They thanked their saviors for their continued guidance. It was a powerful display, a chorus of seemingly happy clients refuting Martel's claims. Yorick looked grim. He brought witnesses, prepared, coached witnesses. They're all from worlds that have been under glyptal control for generations. They probably don't even remember what true freedom feels like. This was Vorn's gambit. He was creating a counter-narrative, a wall of testimony to block Martel's logic. The appeal to emotion was strong. Who was this one human to tell a dozen different species that they were oppressed when they claimed to be grateful? The ledger of a soul is written in deeds, not words. Martel watched the testimony, his expression unyielding. He had anticipated this. He had known Vorn would not rely solely on rhetoric. He has made his argument with stories, Martel said quietly to his crew. Now we will make ours with his history. He nodded to the empty air. Aurora. It's time. Project the Grand Mirror. Show them the pattern. Acknowledged, Commander, the AI's voice replied, projecting the 5-century systemic audit. A new image began to form in the void, an image of breathtaking scale and complexity. It was a star chart of the entire quadrant, but it was alive. It showed the glyptal hegemony's sphere of influence over the last 500 years. And overlaid on it, a river of data began to flow, a torrent of stark, undeniable facts. For each of the dozen worlds whose leaders had just testified, Aurora displayed a timeline. The first data point was the date of the glyptal intervention. The second was the initial state of the world, its GDP, its population growth, its scientific output. Then, year by year, the chart showed the impact of the gratitude tithe. It showed trade with the outside galaxy wither and die. It showed technological innovation flatline, then begin to recede. It showed birth rates fall and emigration rates rise as the brightest and most ambitious fled their stagnant homes if they could. The screen split, showing the witness testimonies on one side and the cold, hard data of their world's decline on the other. The leader of the Pelian Confederacy spoke of stability, while Aurora's ledger showed that Pelia had not produced a single off-world patent in 200 years, and that its life expectancy had dropped by 15%. A vizier from the Tyrian worlds praised glyptal guidance, while the mirror ledger showed his people were now a net importer of basic technologies they themselves had invented 3 centuries prior. One by one, the happy stories were dismantled by the relentless truth of history. The tithes were not sustaining the glyptal's noble work. They were the mechanism of induced decay, ensuring these worlds would never be strong enough to stand on their own, forever dependent on their saviors. The gratitude collar was not just a leash, it was a slow poison killing the future to feed the present. The universe does not grade on a curve, it keeps a perfect count. The grand mirror didn't stop there. It expanded, showing the flow of resources. It highlighted the raw materials flowing from the protectorate worlds into the glyptal hegemony and the paltry trickle of goods and services flowing back. It was the largest, most detailed portrait of systemic economic vampirism the galaxy had ever seen. The genius of it was that it used only public data information available to anyone in the Quorum network. Aurora had not broken any laws. She had simply done the reading. She had shown the work. Vorn stared in horror. He had built his defense on testimony, on feeling, on tradition. And Martel had just used his own history as a weapon to tear it all down. He had not argued with the witnesses. He had shown their testimony to be a beautiful, tragic lie, a story they had been forced to tell themselves to endure the slow decline of their civilizations. "This is a violation." Vorn shrieked, his composure finally and completely gone. "A data crime of unprecedented scale. The Terrans have used their illegal machine to spy on 1,000 worlds. We have spied on no one." Martel's voice cut through the void, cold and final. "This is all from the public record. Trade agreements, census data, patent filings. It is the history you wrote yourselves, Tithe Master. We have simply organized it for the court. We have held up a mirror not just to your actions, but to their consequences." He turned his attention to the triumvirate. "You are the unblinking eye. You see things as they are. Look upon this evidence. This is not a culture of gratitude. It is a mechanism of conquest, made all the more monstrous for its legalistic precision. They do not send armies. They send accountants. They do not break bodies. They break economies. They break futures. We did not bring a censure against their traditions. We brought a censure against their results." The silence that followed was different. It was heavy, filled with the weight of 500 years of slow, methodical theft. The Cathar mountain glowed with a fierce, angry light. The Cygnian swarm became a furious, boiling cloud of red. The Gavorn loremaster's sphere of perfect blackness seemed impossibly to grow even darker. The judgment, when it came, was not a voice but a wave of pure consensus that washed over every ship. The censure of humiliation was not only rejected, it was inverted. The glyptal hegemony was found guilty of systemic predation, a crime so old it had been considered dormant. Their legal right to invoke emergency sustenance pacts was revoked galaxy-wide, effective immediately. All existing gratitude tithes were declared null and void. A full audit overseen by the triumvirate itself would determine the extent of the reparations they now owed to 12 worlds. Vorn's projection flickered and died. The 3 glyptal ships, suddenly stripped of their legal and moral authority, turned to flee into the dark. Kalen Martel said, his voice low. "Sir, let them go. Their power is broken. The rest is just paperwork." Victory had come. But Martel felt its cost. The Terran Mandate had just appointed itself the galaxy's auditor. They had used their sophisticated AI to win a legal victory, setting a precedent that made many of the older, more traditional powers deeply uncomfortable. They had won, but they had also isolated themselves, becoming the champions of a disruptive new form of quantitative justice. The political fallout would last for decades. That was one cost. The other was more personal. He had asked Aurora to compile a case against an entire civilization. In doing so, he had used her logic as a weapon, proving that a mind of pure reason could be the most effective tool in a fight. He had championed the human spirit, but he had won with the cold, hard mind of a machine. The line between his morality and her calculus had blurred, and he knew that was a dangerous new frontier. On the bridge of the Indra, the main screen lit up. It was a feed from the Galactic Public Ledger, the official record of interstellar law. A new entry was blinking, the text settling into place for all to see. Precedent Lock 7.4.1. The Martel Aurora Proviso. All pacts invoking emergency aid must now be subject to a mandatory third-party audit of costs and compensation. The claim of gratitude may not be used as a basis for perpetual or undefined servitude. Privileges of the glyptal hegemony under ancient charters are hereby rescinded. The entry blinked once, then locked into the permanent record, its light a steady, reassuring green. The mirror arrays on the ship's hull, which had been focused to help broadcast Aurora's complex projection, began to cool, their faint hum ceasing. Martel looked at the faces of his crew, tired but triumphant. They had not fired a shot. They had not broken a law. They had won by holding a mirror up to an ancient evil, a mirror so large and so clear that not even the oldest eyes in the galaxy could deny the reflection. Justice was not an ideal you fought for. It was a calculation. You proved a debt, you returned a truth, you forced into the light, no matter how much it burned. They built an empire on a lie. We dismantled it with the receipt.